Not too long ago, the director for the Alliance of Independent Authors, Orna Ross, reached out to me and asked for a small favor. She wanted me to co-host a monthly segment for the Alliance of Independent Authors for their podcast called Reaching More Readers. Now, I did not know this person she was going to introduce me to at all, and I thought, oh my gosh, this could really turn into something quite awful. And I said, you know what, let's get together. Let's see if we gel well. Spoiler alert, it turned out really well. And in fact, actually, this is the first interaction I had with the person, and that is Holly Greenland. Now, Holly Greenland is the content and communications manager at the Alliance of Independent Authors. You might not see her very much, but she is doing a lot of things over the Alliance of Independent Authors website. So if you've been there before, which I highly recommend, you go over there, become a member if you can be able to swing it. If not, you'll love all the resources that are for free there for everybody. Now, with a wealth of experience in content creation, a publishing PhD candidate, and a self-published author, Holly brings invaluable insights to the indie publishing community. And I'm going to sit down and pick her brain and talk to her a little bit about her journey from working with the UK Parliament to freelancing to the Alliance of Independent Authors, and of course her own brand of writing books. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to my new pal, Holly Greenland. Holly, I didn't want to waste any of our energy on talking about some of your past and some of the stuff that you've worked with in getting to Alliance of Independent Authors. But literally, as people are watching this is our first time actually chatting. Am I correct?
Correct. First time. Here we are.
Yeah. So share with me, and share with the listeners here on the podcast, how did we get connected, and what is the potential that we have in working together in the very near future?
Okay, so I have just recently started working with the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is super exciting because I've been a member myself a couple of years, self-published a couple of books during lockdown, as a lot of people started doing, exploring that, found this whole exciting community. And I've been working with Orna there now a couple of months, looking at the blog and producing content that we can share with actually globally big audience in America, which has taken me a bit by surprise, about how to self-publish, essentially, how to do it, what tips and tricks there are, sharing case studies. So it's a really fun job. So I'm looking at the blog, goes out every day, lots of news, podcasts, and then every Monday, big advice piece, which is what I mostly focus on, which is really interesting. But what we're also looking at is how to expand some of our kind of tips and tricks around, particularly around marketing and comms, because that's my background outside of self-publishing, but across a lot of different content in terms of my career. So yeah, that's how we've sort of connected, I think.
Yeah. We ended up and this is kind of like our test run, just to kind of see how well we mesh together. And I thought, what better way to just do that than just to sit down and get to know you, because I love chatting with authors. But you've got a very interesting backstory prior to the Alliance of Independent Authors. Tell me, what is democratic engagement at the UK Parliament? What does that look like? Because I saw that in your bio and I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that even mean? Okay, yeah. So my educational background, I did a lot of creative writing, actually. So I got my master's creative writing, done my BA in English literature, and then I ended up at the BBC running what we call sort of engagement learning campaigns. So it's like if you have marketing and education and kind of merged them. So at the end of a BBC programme, you might hear things that say something like, have you been inspired by today's show? Why don't you come along to X event or download Y pack? So I worked there for a while. And when I came out of that, I was kind of like, where'd you go from there? I was there for about 5 years. And I found this democratic engagement. So it's essentially the same thing, but focused on democracy. So UK Parliament have teams sitting within Parliament. So we sit literally in those buildings where Big Ben is, right next to it. Within the whole process, within the working building, we work together across education, so formal education like schools, universities, but also just outreach into the public to make sure that the UK Parliament is being transparent, that people understand the language, that the website is sharing everything that's taking place. And actually, while I was there, a lot of kind of social media as well. How can we run debates using social media? How can we provide politicians with information from the public? How can we support schools to run elections in their own schools? So there is a publicly funded team, and I ended up there for about 8 years making content and working in comms and engagement, which was really, really interesting place to be. And actually, funnily, doing a kind of publishing role in a way, taking things right from a concept all the way through to kind of pushing it out in a fully formed form, whether that's video, print, digital.
Interesting. You've done a little bit of everything then. What would you say is your preference? Do you prefer being on video, or are you the type of person that likes to just write, hammer away at the keyboard, that type of a thing?
Sure, I'm a bit of a everything kind of person, I think. But I do really love writing, and I really enjoyed the process of writing a novel when I finally did it. When we went into lockdown, and I thought, oh my gosh, what we're going to do with my time? And I sort of revisited something I'd started actually when I was on maternity leave, which was a sort of murder mystery based around a group of mums on maternity leave. And when I revisited that, it reminded me that actually, do you know what? I do love sitting down and, like you say, banging away, getting the ideas out, and yeah, having a bit more space, I guess, and time to be able to then revisit ideas and develop them. Whereas with video, as you will know, once it's done, it's pretty much done. You're kind of, it's out there, you're finished. Whereas with words, you can kind of go back, rework. You've got to be careful not to get stuck in that process. But yeah, I think that's probably where my preference is, yeah.
Interesting. You took a real long way around to actually eventually writing, because you do have your master's in creative and critical writing, and you
Yeah.
have your bachelor's in English and theater. So it seems like you were just made for this. What took so long?
Do you know, I don't know. Do you know, I think I was really lucky that I
Yeah.
ended up getting jobs which were just really interesting. So I had to get a job because I had to earn money.
Yeah.
And maybe had I been doing something where I'd been very unfulfilled, I would have thought, no, do you know what? I need to stop this. I've always wanted to write. I should do that. But because I was so lucky with the jobs I ended up in, you sort of get caught up in it. And I think it probably happens to a lot of people. Suddenly years have gone by and you're thinking, I never did sit down and write that book. Maybe I should try. And so actually, in a way, lockdown and being on things like maternity leave, where you get a lot of suddenly unexpected time to yourself. You think you're going to be looking after a baby, and then you discover quite a lot of the time they're sort of asleep. And obviously, you're just watching them, making sure they're still alive. But you kind of have time to do other stuff. So I guess, yeah, it did take me a long time to get around to it. And it's been interesting revisiting it now. And that sort of then led to what I'm also doing in the background of work, which is this PhD looking at the role of the self-published author and what that kind of means now, and who's finding success, which I find really interesting, just in terms of the people I've met and the different ways people work.
You seem to be hungry for a lot of education and getting informed and such, because obviously you already have 2 degrees and now you're going to be pursuing a PhD in publishing. What led you to think, you know what, 2 degrees ain't enough? I'm going to see about becoming a doctor in publishing.
Well, I mean, part of it I think probably was like, oh, doctor's got a nice ring to it, and then and then I had the post-COVID, oh my God, what am I doing moment, and I sort of had this thought around. I'd been doing self-publishing, speaking to people in forums, connecting with people, and kind of thinking, seeing some similarities among some of the people who are doing really well. They felt, again, you all know this, being in the sector, but when I was coming in quite green, it was like, oh, they're more like entrepreneurs, right? Okay, this is like a business, right? You've got to think of it end to end. So I was sort of looking at that and what information was out there, and actually then spoke to someone at my old university and got connected to someone who, so she's called Alison Baverstock, Professor Alison Baverstock at Kingston, and there is very few academic research papers out there on self-publishing. Really just, 3 or 4 that actually look at it in a lot of detail from an academic perspective, despite the fact there's a lot out there from experts like you looking at it in a lot of different ways. So, so for some reason I thought, oh, that seems like a good idea. I'll do a PhD. So that's what I'm doing. But I'm in the 3rd year at the moment, so it's actually gone really quickly. I've done 2 years, trying to finish it in 3. So I'm hoping to finish in spring next year. I've got some of the data already, and I'm sort of just exploring it now in a bit more depth to kind of come to some conclusions, and then I'll be able to share it hopefully with a bit more wider in the community as well.
Very interesting. How do you plan to leverage this PhD? Is this something that you're going to apply to your own business, or is this just kind of scratching a creative itch where you're just like, oh, I gotta do this?
I think it's a bit of both. I think part of me was, because the information wasn't out there when I was thinking, particularly I was interested in personality, because that's kind of something that interests me in general, personality traits. So one of the things that I've asked about in the big survey that we did, that was around 1,000 authors, was the test on personality traits, the big five. So that was kind of a bit of the itch, I suppose. And then from a business perspective, yeah, maybe I've spent 3 years just trying to work out how I could be successful. Maybe that's what I've done inadvertently. It's like, maybe if I do the piece of research, at the end of it, I'll be like, okay, here's my plan for how to approach it. And does it fit my personality? So I think there was kind of like a personal angle maybe for myself, trying to break into it and thinking, does this work for me? Why does it? Why doesn't it? And then another thing that was just in general about this theme of who are the personalities out there? And another thing that I've asked about a lot, which I find interesting, is whether demographics have an impact, because that's something I've got an interest in generally and came through from democratic engagement as well, is where are there demographics that and characteristics around ethnicity, gender, what's that doing in the self-publishing world? Because essentially it should have democratized storytelling and has it. So there's kind of a question there for me as well that I find interesting.
I got a question for you about, you had experience in freelance writing. Am I correct in that? In about 2019 was when you did that.
Yeah.
What was that transition like from working with the UK Parliament and BBC going over to freelance writing?
It really suited me. I think I was scared to do it. I think for a lot of people, maybe when you're leaving an in-house job where you're very supported by a lot of teams, by a lot of other people, it was kind of scary to go solo. And I guess people do that as well when they're going into authorship. You're leaving something where you're sort of part of a group and then going it alone. So I guess the big difference was that kind of being able to take responsibility for my own projects. What I do love though, and so I still freelance in different ways when really interesting projects come up. What I love is taking a project, working with a team, but being able to kind of take it from them and just get it done. I'm a completer finisher. I don't know if that's a thing in the US, but in the UK, we have these, like when you're at work and you have to do like, what do you like at work? I'm always a completer finisher. I'm someone who likes to get things to the end. So freelance for me really suits me because I get to take something, work with people, but then go away and finish it and then sort of deliver it back and, here we go, it's done. Whereas sometimes when you're caught up in that in-house grind, you can get caught up in the wider kind of issues that happen within a big organisation. So I guess for me, it's been quite freeing actually. And I still work back with UK Parliament. I still freelance write for them, run
nice.
some campaigns and things. So that's really good. And similarly with the BBC, quite a lot of people, when I moved on, there was a big decentralisation of the organisation. So people have gone off to all sorts of places, which means that I can kind of reach into those areas, charities, venues and things where we've all sort of spread out to, which is nice.
So you never really left it per se. It just probably
No.
diminished your role in that specific area.
I suppose so, yeah. I've kept in touch with a lot of people from both actually, and sort of still working with them in various ways, yeah.
Has that ever benefited your career as an author?
Has it? Do you know, it hasn't yet, and maybe that's something to think about actually. Yeah, interesting. I mean, what it has done is meant I've been able to continue practicing my writing in lots of different ways. So, for example, actually, for Parliament, there was a project where we were looking at stories of human rights, kind of what we would call like human rights heroes. So ordinary people who have made a difference in terms of human rights, particularly from different backgrounds and communities. And it gave me the opportunity to think about writing some short stories for children, because actually some of those stories just weren't being told and they were difficult for schools to access. And because we were working together on that project and because writing is a background of mine, I was able to bring that. And so that was a great experience actually, because it means that you're writing and publishing. So I saw that all the way through from commissioning the illustrators, getting the design work done, thinking about how we market it. So essentially it's a publishing project, writing the actual content, the stories themselves, all the way through, but by working with UK Parliament. So it's kind of a different way of self-publishing in a way. And then you get useful feedback as well. So all the feedback they're getting from people that are using those comes through, and I can kind of think about how to impact the rest of my writing. Yeah.
I love how I got you stumped there. You were wanting to know, like, hey, do we have any questions ahead of time? No, I'm just going to put you on the spot. And this is great. Let's see if we can kind of transition over. We talked about your degrees and we've talked about your experience in freelance work. What led you over to the Alliance of Independent Authors?
I knew them through being a member myself, and I'd spoken with Orna and maybe one other member of staff because of my PhD, so in a more sort of academic sense when I was doing a bit of research around the area. But I actually saw the advert for the blog editor in one of the newsletters. And I just did so it was quite a traditional process. I applied through, because usually with freelance, and with author opportunities, it's through people you know. But actually with this one, I did a very traditional application, and then I got an email back, and Orna was like, "Oh yeah, I remember you. Actually, we have met," and we kind of connected. So we had a really good conversation about, they wanted someone, I think, to come in with to the blog because it's a really successful blog. I mean, there's amazing content on there that you can search. Yeah. And I think they needed someone who, I'm really keen to continue that kind of level of detail that they've got. And then also maybe bring some of my background around things like diversification and thinking about how you shift over from other careers into being an author. So hopefully it's a good mix where I can kind of keep that going, that kind of drumbeat of the big questions people are always asking when they come into self-publishing, and also maybe bring a little bit of other views from some of the experience I've got, I guess.
What really attracted you to the Alliance of Independent Authors in the first place?
I think the fact that they look at authorship in different levels I find really useful. So thinking about people as coming in at that kind of associate level where you're really new and you're very green and you're still trying to think, what are these, what is this? What is rapid release? What does that even mean? Like, you might, why would I need to think about who the market is, where my audience is? Like, why am I thinking about that? I'm thinking about my book. I'm thinking about my story, coming in at that level. Then through to that sort of author point, which I guess is where I'm at, where you've done a couple, you kind of learn, and you're now thinking, is this a business? Can I do something with this? And then right up to, this is where I find it really interesting when we get stories through from those, what we sort of call the authorpreneurs, where they're really in that business mindset and really kind of making something that works for them and gives them things like the flexibility they need, all of that. So the Alliance of Independent Authors very much kind of thinks across the board. So they're not going at people from this kind of top level, you're an author now, right, here you go, here it is, the hard the hard business. You can kind of come in at any point, and I think that's really interesting. The other thing that's great actually is that if you're not a member, you can come in and still access a lot of the information actually through the blog and through the podcast. There's a lot out there for people who are just starting to think, is this for me? That's completely free, completely available. And then if you think, actually now I'm stepping into that business set, I need a bit more kind of hands-on, direct personal advice, that's where the membership is really important, because you can come in and access that. I mean, it is incredible what you can get, because you can have contracts looked at. If you're thinking about licensing, I mean, these are words that I just didn't, a couple of years ago weren't even something I was thinking about. You could license one thing but not another. Oh, right, I could think about audio and doing that in a totally different way to how I've been very hands-on with my print. So it's like those sort of detailed questions that you've got. Once you remember, you can actually go to them and get that expertise and that advice, which is really, a very valuable resource, I think. I think it's the fact that there's this offer across the board, which is really exciting and interesting for me as someone kind of somewhere in the middle, I suppose.
Yeah, it's such an unending supply of resources. I mean, for a few years when I had stumbled over Alliance of Independent Authors, I was just kind of a looky-loo. I would just read a lot of the blog posts and consume it. But then once I got into the membership, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot more. Even back here, and I'm like, this is just absolutely incredible. What would you say is one thing that you found super surprising about the Alliance of Independent Authors now that you've been behind the scenes? What was something that you were like, whoa, I did not think about that?
I think, now I've met the whole team. Well, one thing is just they're all really, really lovely. I mean, they shouldn't have been a surprise.
They are sweethearts.
But they are. They're really, really nice. And the fact that they've all got this different journey into being authors, and they are all indie authors. Like, they're coming from the position where they know how it feels. They know some of the disappointments. They also know how to make it a success, and then they're also bringing other skills in there. So that's really exciting actually to talk with the team when we're thinking about ideas for new blog posts and what we're going to cover next time, is because there's so many different views and opinions, but they're real specialists, and real, depth of experience there. So everything that's coming out is coming from, a place of expertise, but also from a really friendly, lovely team. And it's quite a close knit team. That there's, I can't think how many there are of us, but it's quite a small little group, but across different countries, different backgrounds, different experience, and that means that the content and the stuff that we're producing, all the advice, is coming from a lot of different places, which I think is good fun, and hopefully good for the people that are then receiving it at the other end to get different viewpoints, because being an author is not the same for everyone, and also people haven't even got the same goals. People are doing it for lots of different reasons and lots of different ideas of what success means to them. But yeah, that's funny that you were a lurker. I think we have quite a lot of lurkers to begin with, who are just in the background, kind of looking at bits and pieces, maybe having a little look on Facebook, and then eventually maybe a little comment, and then you kind of start to join and start to think, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I can get a bit more involved here, and you sort of step into the community a bit more, I think.
It was a friend of mine, Michael Aran, who actually had gently, impressed upon me, like, hey, you probably should become a member. And I was just like, I don't know. Okay, let's do it. I just, eventually I caved, and now I've just been stuck with you guys for, gosh, let's see here. I think I'm going on my 5th year of a membership. So
oh, wow.
I think I'm doing all right. And I plan on
good.
to keep doing that as well, because I really love what Alliance of Independent Authors has to offer. Well, hey, as we start to wrap up the podcast, I want to ask you the question I ask every one of my guests before you, and that is, what advice do you have for aspiring authors and self-publishers out there?
My sort of top piece of advice?
Yeah.
Ooh. I suppose, I'm sure you get this a lot, but I guess it's the don't give up piece of advice, because the more I'm reading, the more I'm meeting people, the more, it's not an easy ride for most people in terms of getting to the point where you feel you can sustain yourself. But actually that resilience, and actually that's what I'm finding a lot with the personality information, having that resilience, keeping going, keeping positive, trying out new things, and thinking of it as quite, maybe for a lot of us, will be more of a marathon than a sprint. Not everyone, some people are really super lucky, but I guess resilience and keep on going is probably my big bit of advice.